Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the festival director, program director of Something Wicked Film Festival and Events, and welcome to our podcast today. If you have been following us over the last month or so, we have been honoring the amazing producer, writer, director Roger Corman by presenting some of his films that you may have or may not have seen. Tonight, we have one of his latter films, in which is surprisingly a film that I was never expecting him to do, which is Frankenstein Unbound. I guess everyone has to do a Frankenstein type movie in their career at some point, and this is Roger Corman's version of that story. And to speak with me today about this movie is Thomas Tinnerello and Dave Watkins. Welcome,
Good evening.
guys.
Or is it day? I don't know.
It's technically still day.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. It is certainly the evening now where I am.
Well, it's probably the perfect time for speaking about this film. And so we're going to get started with this film because anyone who's been following us over the last month or so, watching these special episodes, is probably wondering why we're doing Frankenstein Unbound instead of some of his other more well-known films. All right, so. First off, you have to give me your opinions on what you thought about the movie, Thomas. We'll start with you first.
Well, I think the reason why we're doing this film is because, if those of you who don't know, all the stuff that Roger, if you're just tuning into this podcast, you have listened to our episodes on The Raven. No, sorry, we haven't done The Raven yet. Pit and the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death. Roger Corman did a crap ton of fantastic classic movies of all genres, not just horror. But he also did the original Little Shop of Horrors, Death Race 2000, It Conquered the World, and started the career of many, many Hollywood luminaries, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola. And this movie of his 50, 60-year career is his last directorial credit. This is the last movie that Roger Corman ever directed on this planet Earth. And he made it in 1989. It was released in 1990, which numerically makes it still technically an 80s movie. There's parts of this movie that make it feel almost like a 60s or 70s movie. But yeah, it's definitely one for all seasons. And I couldn't find any good reason why he chose this story to be his last. Because after this, all he ever did was producing, and there was no inclination that he ever had any desire to go back to the director's chair after this. I don't know why.
I do know why. I listened to the director's commentary on Piranha, and he does say on that commentary he does address it a little bit, not in a big detail, but
What did he say?
So he said that this production company that was doing this movie, they wanted to make a Frankenstein movie, and they kept asking him to do it, and he didn't want to do it. He's like, I don't want to make a Frankenstein movie, And then they kept upping the budget. And they kept coming back to him, and they were like, "You pick any." He's like, "The only way I'll do a Frankenstein movie if it's something that's different than any other Frankenstein movie." And then he discovered this guy's novel that Brian Aldiss or something like that, and he thought it was imaginative, and so he's like, "Okay, I'll do it if we do it in this science fiction type of way." So that was kind of how it went down.
Yeah, Brian Aldiss, that's how I pronounced it at least. He, maybe you're right.
You're probably right. That sounds more right. I'm always mispronouncing shit.
Yeah, but he, I don't know if this is a novel or a novella, but it's actually part of a trilogy or a series actually, because he wrote a sequel to it called Dracula Unbound too.
Okay.
But anyway, so but for those of you who don't know, Brian Aldiss is a very prolific science fiction author. He is still alive, as far as I know. And his most famous short story is probably Super Toys Last All Summer Long, which
he died in 2017 at 92 years of age.
Bummer.
It was a long time, yeah.
Well, anyway, Super Toys was the basis for Steven Spielberg's AI. So
which was originally going to be directed by Stanley Kubrick.
That is right. So Kubrick and Spielberg and Roger Corman all read this guy's stuff. So I guess that means we all should get out there and read us some Brian Aldiss.
So yeah, I was going to ask you if you'd read it because I was really curious of how close this was to the actual book.
I have not. I sought it out. I could not find it.
I can't imagine it being that close to it. The way what happens on screen here, though, I bet
Well,
you just change
you know,
stuff.
I mean, look, guys. We know Roger Corman's track record when it comes to adaptations.
Yeah.
Really loose. I mean, the author of Carnosaur, which he produced, famously disowned that movie as being an abomination of what his novel was.
Yeah.
Anybody who's seen The Raven, which he directed, knows that there is like a smattering of Poe in the very beginning and the very end, and the rest is just a farcical Harry Potter before Harry Potter kind of thing that was happening there. And with same thing with Mask of the Red Death is a little bit more faithful to Poe. But yeah, Pit in the Pendulum just kind of goes off on its own before it finally settles back into the short story. So there's no way of knowing. I read the Wikipedia article on the short story, and from what I read
of the Frankenstein Unbound.
Yeah, Frankenstein Unbound. Yeah,
I couldn't even find that.
And for what I've read, it's they didn't really talk very much about the story itself. They talked about kind of this Buchanan, the doctor in the story, is kind of portrayed as sort of a Doctor Who type figure, and maybe like a sort of Joseph Campbell's Campbellian kind of eternal hero sort of guy, because he kind of travels all throughout time, fighting monsters, I guess, in different time periods.
Yeah. That was one thing I was thinking at really would this was over how this would have been so much better had it been like more than just the story of Frankenstein. Had it followed him through, it could almost be like a mini series or something where it followed him through different time jumps.
Oh yeah, it could have been like the serious version of Waxwork 2, Lost in Time.
Yeah. Which he does. They do go there for the Frankenstein first.
Yep. Which hopefully we will talk about that movie in another podcast.
Yeah. I don't know about Waxwork 2, but definitely Waxwork.
Yeah, I'm down for Waxwork. I got the double feature collection.
Same here.
Yeah, but so the movie Roger Corman did before this was about they say it's around 20 years. Some say it's about 15 years before, but it was called Von Richthofen. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And Brown. And it's about airplanes, aviation stuff. And so we had a really like shitty shoot where 4 people died during the shoot. Having crashes and all that. And he said he was just exhausted by the end of it. He said he'd done like 13 features in a row. And he said, okay, I'm going to take a break for a year. And that ended up being 20 years. But he's kept producing. But I think that kind of put him in a bad place with directing. And so Frankenstein Unbound, I'm not sure how it went for directing that, but he didn't do any more. That was good enough for him. So.
Well, that's an interesting story because I always wondered why he stopped directing. And I never knew. So that's good to know.
I don't know if he doesn't specifically say they died on the set, so I'm like done with it. It was more like he was just exhausted, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with it because he had a lot of trouble with that movie, which I've never seen, but it does look kind of interesting just reading about it.
Mm.
Well, I don't know. Well, sadly, we're there. Most of the people who worked on Frankenstein Unbound are also dead, unfortunately.
Well, Bridget Fonda is still alive, and Jason Patrick.
He's the last one standing, pretty much. So if we ever meet Bridget Fonda, the first thing, hey, what was it like making Frankenstein Unbound?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a question she's ever been asked ever.
Well, and Jason Patrick was a fine cameo in this movie as Lord Byron. He is still alive, thank God.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other every time we talk about Corman, we always talk about his brilliant writing partners. In the Poe films, he had some of the best in the genre. He had Richard Matheson, he had Charles Beaumont, the two giants of Twilight Zone, because the Twilight Zone really had 3 great authors: Rod Serling, Richard Matheson, and Charles Beaumont. By now, we made this movie; they are both gone. So what does he turn to? He turns to F.X. Feeney, who wrote such classics as The Big Brass Ring? And this movie. I think those are the only 2 credits. He has a cool last name, though.
Yeah. It seems like with that kind of name, you'd be writing a lot of shit.
Yeah, it sounds like something made up. It sounds like a made-up name. But the other guy who's credited with writing the script is Ed Niemeyer. I don't know how to pronounce that, but he was the guy who wrote RoboCop, Starship Trooper, Total Recall. So yeah, I could see some hints of RoboCop in this. I mean, actually, RoboCop was first kind of pitched to people as like Frankenstein as a cop, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could definitely see that going all through this.
So this movie, they were certain if Roger Corman directed a Frankenstein movie, it would make a lot of money. So they spent $11 million on it and made about $335,000. But and then the next month, in December 1990, Edward Scissorhands came out and made a bunch of money. But this movie it fell pretty miserably at the box office. And 2 years later, Bram Stoker's Dracula came out and made a ton of money. But it had a $40 million budget, and I think it made around 200 and something.
So if he just waited 2 more years, he could have been like well, that's one thing Roger Corman was famous as being. He was famous for, whenever a trend came up or something, he'd say, "Well, I did it first," and sometimes he was right, and sometimes he wasn't. But yeah, with the Carnosaur, he did beat Jurassic Park to the theaters. In the case with the Dracula Frankenstein craze that happened in '92, yeah, he beat them to the punch with this movie. And honestly, I would probably rewatch this movie before I rewatched Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, which is really Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And
I like it. But also in like '94, the other Frankenstein movie came out by Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, also Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein with Robert De Niro as the monster.
And that movie made a lot of money too, though.
Those were just because they had a lot of advertising behind it, and De Niro as the monster. This movie, on the other hand, has Nick Bramble, who people out there might remember as Friar Tuck in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner.
I saw that. Yeah, that's like the only thing. He was pretty good doing that too. No, he was a Friar Tuck. Wasn't he Little John, right?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. It was Little John. It was Little John. He kicked the crap out of Kevin Costner on the bridge with a stick.
Yeah, and he was pretty good. He's pretty good in that too.
He's great.
Keep in mind that with this movie, no one really cared much for Roger Corman's name when this movie came out, whereas Bram Stoker's Dracula had Francis Ford Coppola's name behind it, Keanu Reeves, and a huge cast.
They also had 30 million. That $30 million more dollars to make the movie too. On top of that,
yeah. Even Edward Scissorhands, when that came out, had Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp.
Vincent Price is in that too.
Yeah,
that was one thing I was thinking. It's funny, about halfway through this movie, I started thinking like they really messed up. I love John Hurt; he's a great actor, but I think he was miscast in this, because I think if they had cast somebody younger with more sex appeal, it would have done better.
Yeah.
I think you might be right about that. I mean, he's supposed to be American in this movie, and I'm sorry, I cannot buy John Hurt as an American to save his life. That's the least of his problems. But I for the most part, I get used to him after a while. And I honestly think that, we're talking about the cast here before we segue to talk about our initial impressions. I mean, I'll lead with that, because I first saw this movie on, I think I probably saw it in Creature Features with Dr. Paul Bearer, at least the ending. And then later on, I saw it again in uncensored form on HBO or something. And I saw it with my brother Nick, who I remember his 15, 16-year-old self liked it. And especially like the ending, which we'll talk about. This movie has a really powerful ending. And he said, "Yeah, I wish it had a sequel, because it kind of just leaves you hanging." And I agree with him. And sadly, I don't think we're ever going to get that. But anyway, but the cast in this movie, for what it is pretty stacked for the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, you have John Hurt, who is still an Academy Award winner / a nominee. I don't know if he won yet. Oh, he didn't win for Elephant Man. I'm sure he was nominated. But
but he was. I mean, I'm not. He's a great actor. I just think that the movie would have been more successful had they, especially when he's the one that ends up with Bridget Fonda in one scene. They just don't. They don't. There's no chemistry. And
that is the thing too. Apparently. Yeah, I mean, spoilers, folks. They apparently have a much hotter sex scene in the original cut of this movie, because you see flashes of it in the trailer.
Oh wow.
There is in the trailer that is definitely not in the movie.
Well, I'm kind of glad they left that out because I was not feeling it for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, it's a no. Yeah, I mean, he did have like a. I mean, this is a guy who used to hang out with Mick Jagger, so I don't know. Maybe he thought he could channel some of that Jagger energy.
Well,
But
I think in real life he could pull that shit off. I just think that it wasn't presented, and I mean, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it in the movie, but I mean,
yeah,
obviously in real life, somebody like John Hurt, he's a pretty well known actor. He's probably really rich. He can, I'm sure he didn't have a
yeah.
problem with it.
But then, but then opposite him, you have Raoul freaking Julia
Yeah,
as Frankenstein, who I think is probably one of the best Frankensteins in movie history, just by virtue of Raoul Julia.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he hadn't had a name really when this came out.
Oh yeah, you're right. No, because Addams Family wouldn't come out until 2 years after this movie. But he was known primarily at this time for I think Kiss of the Spider Woman had come out. He got an Oscar nod for that, I think, and a couple other movies.
Well, I think he might have won for that. Actually, I know was it him or William Hurt?
Yeah, that's right. I think he did. But before that, he was a legendary stage actor, and he was actually, I think, one of the few actors who has played both Dracula and Frankenstein, because he was known for being part of the 1979 Broadway revival of the play Dracula, where he played Dracula. Boy, do I wish I could have gone back in time and got to see that, because his dark charisma and that voice would have been so perfect for Dracula. And
What's weird about Raul Julia? Now this movie, it came out around the time where I was movies had like a really big impression on me, and so Raul Julia was in a bunch of stuff like the Addams Family sequel, Street Fighter. but the weird thing was, right when he started to become big, he got cancer and died, and it was something that he kept from everybody. But it was 4 years after this movie came out, he died. So he was just beginning to blow up, and he would have done a lot more stuff. And it was weird because at the time, I just figured he was in a bunch of stuff, and I didn't even realize. It was weird when he died. It was just like, okay, but I don't know. It's just weird that
he was pigeonholed for a while as villains. Like he played villains in a lot of stuff, including the Clint Eastwood movie, The Rookie, and then of course. The Addams Family allowed him to not be seen as a villain because of his dark features. And of course, like you said, he passed away prematurely, in my opinion, because he was such a great actor who I don't think was given enough time to blossom into a real star after those two movies became huge hits.
Yeah, and I agree with Thomas where this is probably one of the better, if not best, Dr. Frankenstein. The way that he played it is really good. It's really, really strong.
Yeah, he's got so much charisma that just dominates everybody on the screen, and he exudes like not just charisma but intelligence and anger and guilt. He feels so guilty inside for the people that his monster has killed, and that's kind of a big theme that runs through this movie is the responsibility of the scientist to the world for what they create. Actually, I think this movie makes a good double feature with Oppenheimer.
I think Oppenheimer makes a good double feature with itself.
Well, it's long enough to be.
Yeah.
It's long to be. But yeah, I mean,
it's funny. I was in the theater watching Oppenheimer, and I was kind of digging it. About halfway through, my wife's like, I'm not even liking this movie. Yeah, I was like, really?
It starts in a strange kind of way that it's funny how like all this, I don't know if it's all this a short story or just this script, but I feel like this, at least the final version that I can look at here, in a weird way it ends up being a more faithful adaptation of Mary Shelley's book than definitely the original Frankenstein and the James Whale's version, because it starts past tense like the novel does. It starts like someone telling a story from the icy tundra,
which is that's the way the novel. Yeah, I always like the ice scenes. It's like that in Kenneth Branagh's version too. It starts off with the ship and Aidan Quinn's character, but
oh yeah, I would say definitely Branagh's version, for all its faults, is probably the most faithful adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel that's ever been put to screen, probably. But this one, at least, is probably a lot more imaginative.
Right, yeah.
It is the icy tundra, but the narration from Buchanan, John Hurt's character, tells us that this is the icy tundra of the frozen future. And it starts with our hero quoting Einstein, saying if he'd known what the atom bomb would have unleashed, he would have been a watchmaker. And as he's trudging through, he's saying that here I am at the end of the world or the beginning of a new one, but a record must be kept. And the whole movie pretty much just up until the beginning of the last scene is just a flashback. One big flashback. Very classical kind of way to do this, very high tech. And by the way, before we move on, by the end of the movie, I love the aesthetic, the overall aesthetic of this movie, which I call techno-Victorian, because you have the new Los Angeles, very futuristic Century City type thing going on, and then that will give way when he gets sucked by this time tornado, basically, that was started by his invention, which was supposed to be the ultimate weapon that was going to bring peace to humanity, basically.
Yeah.
But he makes it for the Defense Department and tests it for them, but it ends up making all these time holes, these time tornadoes, and people keep disappearing, and stuff keeps coming through the time tunnels and stuff, and that's how he ends up going through. Some Mongolian warrior pops out of a hole while he's attending the funeral. These neighborhood kids are having a funeral for their old bike, and then because they have a new bike now, and progress has killed the old one, and I'll say this is a good choice by the screenwriters here. They give us rooting interest in Buchanan by having him try to save the kids from the time tornado. So instantly they pull a save the cat on us to try and make us like him. And
it seems like throughout the movie he's constantly doing stuff like that, which never goes well for him. Like every time he tries to save someone, he ends up getting his ass kicked.
You're right. I had a quick flash of the entire plot of the movie, and yes, oh man, Roger Corman is like the sadistic, cruel god of this movie, who just keeps punishing him for trying to do the right thing.
So when he gets sucked into the time loop, he has like a Knight Rider like car with him that comes along for the journey, which. And it's
that car is super cool.
Yeah.
That car is a prototype 1988 Ital design Aztec concept car. So I don't know how they got it, because that sounds like something really expensive if they crashed it. But according to IMDb, that car was real. It was not a prop, and it really worked.
It looks really cool. Yeah, the way there's like two seats, there's like something between the two seats. I don't know. It looked really futuristic, I guess.
Yeah, it had a working TV in it, kind of like how we have today with our little monitors that give us the MapQuest and stuff. Or who uses MapQuest anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Google Maps. But of all the future stuff, that looked the most convincing, because in the lab they have the old computers, like the boxy computers and the old graphics, which I guess they didn't foresee what it's really going to look like.
Yeah,
it's weird. I've seen some movies that were old where they actually kind of anticipated. I can't remember the name of it, where it was more, instead of a square, it was more rectangle. Some of their monitors, which is I can't remember what that was, but
I think I remember that was. And that's fairly recent. I don't know if you remember the same thing that I'm remembering, but apparently there was like in a few episodes of The Flash where they go to Earth 2, and for whatever reason, Earth 2, all of the computer monitors or TV screens are all vertical instead of horizontal.
Well, yeah, I guess the future here could be a different future, because I'm not exactly sure how the time thing works. What's weird too is with his character, John Hurt's character doesn't seem at all concerned with messing with time when he goes back to the past.
Oh, that's hilarious! Yeah, right. You're right, and we will get to that. But really quickly, you were asking how does the time thing really work? And I thought that myself as I was watching it, and then I remembered that apparently, because basically his thing is a giant laser, but it's a laser that you could poke a hole in the fabric of time with, basically, and use to make little black holes to destroy things. I think that was the idea. That's not quite how lasers work, but weirdly, I stumbled upon this while listening to another podcast, a fictional one, a science fiction one called Case 32.
Yeah.
Which which was an adaptation of a Portuguese series with Oscar Isaac and Julianne Moore. And in that podcast, it's a whole, the story is just like this psychiatrist who's trying to determine whether or not this mental patient she's interviewing is actually a time traveler. And he describes his time machine as basically using lasers. Because apparently there is a theory of time travel where you can use a crap ton of lasers, making a tunnel basically around your object. And somehow, if you have like forced power, if you have enough energy behind your laser, you can use the laser light to bend light and then bend reality. I'm not sure how that works, but that's the idea, that you can, in fact, maybe use lasers to time travel. So,
right. And I guess I wasn't talking when I said how it works. I wasn't talking about the actual how it works, because obviously, but I mean as far as what the consequences are when it's used. But also you got other questions of. I mean, obviously, a lot of it's just going to be like because the movie had to happen. But why is he sucked into it? Which it could be. Other people are being sucked in, but maybe the clouds or the time vortexes are targeting certain people, especially people who were involved with the creation of it.
That would make sense too, in a weird way. Yeah. That's another thing that this movie doesn't really give us any time to consider, is the idea of, can you change the past? It seems to me like at some point maybe Buchanan just kind of gives up trying to do that, which probably explains some of his actions later, because it doesn't seem like anything he does really affects the outcome of the future at all. Which, if that's the case, then that would mean that they're going by the theory of what I call linear causality, which is basically that if you don't have to worry about changing anything in the past because it's already happened. So if you go into the past somehow, no matter what you do was what already happened back then. So all you're doing is just going back and fulfilling whatever happened. So if you went back in time, you couldn't prevent John F. Kennedy from getting assassinated. But if on the Zapruder film you see a guy in weird looking, modern glasses with a hat on, maybe that's me back there, and it was always me, and I was always there,
Right.
So
yeah, that's a good theory, and that's a good storytelling thing, because it makes the storytelling easier, even unless he does something that obviously creates a difference in some, in the past. But here you never really see other than like a little bit of the future, so you don't know if anything that he did. Obviously, him creating the time travel laser thing to begin with caused what happened in the far future.
Yeah, this frozen tundra future. Yeah, for sure. We don't know exactly how it caused it, but yeah. The news items is that before he goes get through the time tornado, which it's not really a tornado, but that's what I'm going with because it sounds cool. Yeah. Is that there was a worldwide vigil for the last tree of the last rainforest fell down, and as I was watching that, I was like, wow, remember the early 90s when we were so concerned about the rainforest getting cut down? Remember when we had a whole animated movie about trying to save rainforest where Tim Curry played an evil sludge pile? Remember that?
Yeah. It really was a big deal. Yeah.
I guess we stopped caring about the daggum rainforest, huh? Nobody's really said anything about that.
Yeah, they kind of moved on to, I guess, the ozone now. So.
Well, yeah, maybe that's why climate change is the way it is today, because we just stopped caring about the daggum rainforest.
Yeah.
Tim Curry won all, I guess.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about the rainforest, so I remember that. Yeah. I guess they kind of like went a little too far with it. People stopped caring about it. They had to come up with something new.
The rainforest was something that was very important at that time. We had the Fern Gully, the last rainforest. You had this. You had a lot of things wanting to reference the fact that the more that we cut down and industrialize the rainforest, the more we're destroying the environment. People wanted to make a point.
Yeah, for sure. And also he gets back in time. He's got his car, which thankfully I think it goes on some kind of, it's got to be fully electric, but he doesn't apparently need to charge it at all because he's there for several days.
Yeah, but the technology is a lot further along than their technology now. He probably does have to. Who knows? He may not ever have to charge it, but you would think he would eventually. But it does. He doesn't use it all the time. It's kind of like he stores it for a little while.
Yeah, he sneaks it in a barn, kind of like what McFly sort of does in
Yeah.
Back to the Future.
I was going to say that too, but yeah, I was thinking. So Back to the Future came out in '85, so the car is very. I like immediately when the car's there, I was thinking Back to the Future, but he actually uses the car more than they do in most of the Back to the Future movies.
Yeah. So basically, like the kid. So let's. I think the general conceit here of this movie, you can see how high concept it is. We have not just a guy traveling through time; he gets dumped. Just so happens he's the Frankenstein of his generation, basically, and he just so happens to get dumped in Vienna in the late 1700s, and he gets to meet Mary Shelley, who is attending the trial of this girl for reasons we'll find out later, and her neighbor Victor Frankenstein and his.
Yeah, and him meeting Frankenstein first. He meets him randomly. He goes into a restaurant, and it's the only seat available, and he sits down, and just happens to be Frankenstein. But like this reminds me of Doctor Who, where he ends up, in situations like that. I could see where the reference to Doctor Who would come into place, and maybe like if you could connect the time vortexes to as kind of like TARDIS, where they are putting him in a certain place at a certain time to try to change something, and it does seem like it might trying to be going in that type of direction, but it doesn't really commit to it fully,
Yeah, and it's funny how like easy Buchanan is about time travel, and like all he needs is a bit of gold. Like he just pawns his gold, and that's how he close.
But they didn't want to waste a lot of time with him having to try to get money, I don't know. And he doesn't get new shoes. He has his sneakers on still, and they make comments about that.
I didn't notice that. That's pretty cool. He's also got a futuristic wristwatch on, which sounds like incredible, and it tells time. Look at these. There's no clockwork or anything in it. It's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, they was it like I think and when it shows Shelley, like not Mary Shelley, like there was this Percy.
Percy.
Yeah, Percy Shelley. When he's the one that sees the shoes, and then Byron's like, yeah, I already questioned him all about that stuff.
Yeah. And Percy Shelley, if I'm not mistaken, played by Michael Hutchence, who is the lead singer of In Excess.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't know who that is, Google it, guys, because they were big.
Yeah. I didn't know who they were, but it was a very tragic story what happened to them. I was looking at it.
Yeah, heroin is a heck of a drug, man.
Yeah.
Heroin's a heck of a drug. But yeah, so like there's a trial going on that apparently oh crap, it's in my notes, but I think like it's his younger brother who got killed.
Right, yeah, that's right.
And it turns out that this girl is accused of killing this kid, but in fact it is Frankenstein's creation who did it. And they meet in the woods, and Buchanan sees them meet in the woods, and he sees Frankenstein wrestling with his guilt over creating the monster and tries to shoot the thing with his hand cannon. And he misses, of course. And this, I think, is a good time to probably talk about, because this is the first time we get to see the monster. And I got to say, this is probably one of my favorite designs for the Frankenstein monster. This thing has gone through so many permutations and mutations throughout the years of cinema. And I don't know, what do we think of Nick Bramble's performance as the monster? Because first of all, I love the veins and muscles that stick out in ways that don't make sense. I love his head. In his head, you see these like metal copper discs that protrude out from his forehead like horns.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very subtle hint at how the monster is described in Mary Shelley's book.
Looks a little bit like a Cenobite, like a little bit like those things come out of his head like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he has extra fingers, and you can see
yeah. And when they make the Bride of Frankenstein, she looks very similar. I think maybe it's like a metal conductor, like kind of like the bolts on Frankenstein's head,
Oh yeah, I think that's where he puts the electrodes to hook him up to the. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly.
Apparently, you can't take them out once you're alive, but
Yeah, It would probably damage their brain more than it's already been damaged. But yeah, but the most iconic thing about the look, which you don't really get to see a whole lot of, you do see it in some very dramatic close-ups later on in the movie, but it's in the poster, which is one of the best posters ever, that the monster's eyeballs are stitched together from other eyeballs.
Yeah.
Like his eyes,
it looks, they do look good.
Yeah, his eyes are 3 different colors.
Some kind of crazy contact lenses, I guess, but they look very, very well done.
Oh yeah, which is pretty dope, if you ask me.
Yeah, as far as his performance, though, at first I was kind of. It's been a while since I saw it. I saw it when it first came out, and I saw it again like today. But at first I was kind of like I wasn't sure about it. But the more times he's on screen, I think the more effective it is. And he's not on screen for very much until he's briefly in it for the first half of the movie a few times, but then he becomes a larger part in the last like half hour or so.
Oh yeah, and he some pretty cool lines like "Who is God?" Maybe.
Yeah.
When he has this whole nice little conversation towards the end with Buchanan about, Victor made me, who made you? He's like, I don't know, God maybe. Who is God maybe? I think you better ask Victor that. I will. And he never does. But yeah, I think that's just a beautiful little exchange. Like there's a lot of God talk in this movie. Just put that out there. And a Jesus joke that I wasn't offended at all. Because there's a time where he's sitting there with his super smart Google car, basically, let's call it. And he's like, Jesus, he says the Lord's name in vain. And then boop, Jesus, no initial for Jesus, H for Jesus Christ.
I think one thing about the monster that struck me in other editions too, and he is very often brutal and he usually kills somebody by mistake, but there is some like small amount of humanity in him, and it seems that it's kind of dismissed here, and he uses John Hurt's character uses the God as an excuse, an abomination of God as an excuse to kill him later on at the end,
Well, it's not, I don't think it's an excuse, but I think it's part of his arc, because Frankenstein is clearly an atheist, and he even says as much to Buchanan towards the end of the movie when he's finally embraced his role as creator of monsters towards the end of the movie, when his wife has died and he gets the idea to finally capitulate to the monster's desire to make a mate for him. And he tells Buchanan, God is a crutch for weaker men than you and I. And and that's when you realize, oh my gosh, I do have a lot in common with him. I don't care about I should have cared more about the consequences of my creation. That thing is an abomination in the eyes of God. So I think that's part of it. And
it goes with the arc, but I can't help but think that they could have worked it out. John Hurt's character and the monster, in that icy tundra where there's no other people, and he almost could have used his help at that point.
You could be my friend.
Yeah. I don't know. But Frankenstein monster seems open to it too. It's not like he comes in trying to attack him at first, but I don't know. I guess he is kind of a wild card. You never know when he's going to just kill somebody out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is like the monster has an arc too. He starts off very innocent and childlike, where he doesn't even know what the word murder is. Frankenstein has to tell him what it is. And then it's later on when he's about to kill Elizabeth, Frankenstein's wife, when he goes, when she goes, Victor will be very mad if you harm me. And he goes, I know. So that's the only time where he kind of crosses over. All the other times, the monster only kills people because he's provoked, because some stupid constable starts putting his little whistle on. That guy's head gone.
Yeah. I mean, he told him to stop doing the whistle. I mean, just
yeah. I mean, come on. If a big guy with with metal horns in his head and stitches and extra fingers tells you to stop doing something, guys, ladies and gentlemen out there, you better comply. All right.
Yeah. Sure.
But somebody, it's funny because somebody. Before we move on from talking about the monster, which we'll probably do more of later on anyway, with somebody online, I think it was one of the reviewers of this movie on IMDb, said that this is like the one version of the Frankenstein mythos where there's like zero sympathy for the monster. Like he's just a freaking monster and he's scary. I don't know if I agree with that 100%, but I don't know. What do y'all think? I think Watkins, you think he's just there's like zero humanity in this guy, and we're not supposed to sympathize with him at all?
I don't know. I mean, I think it may have been written that way, but I think that there's some humanity coming through in the actor's performance. I think I don't know what his intentions are at the end because he's saying some weird shit, but he's not necessarily trying to kill John Hurt's character. I don't know, but and he wants to mate. I mean, the Dr. Frankenstein character kind of messes that up too because the only reason he wants to he kills his, which happens in Bride of Frankenstein too, but he kills his I guess his wife or his fiance or whatever, Elizabeth. Yes. He kills her, and then so Dr. Frankenstein's motivation, he thinks he's going to bring her back to life and she's going to be human again, but she comes back and Frankenstein thinks it's going to be his wife, and so it's almost like a conflict of interest at that point of who's going to get with her. So it becomes like a fight at that point.
Yeah,
Dr. Frankenstein could have handled it a little more diplomatically.
Yeah, the plot of this.
I think Frankenstein and Dr. Frankenstein in general, when they have the Bride of Frankenstein side story, is always going to be conflicted, no matter how you put it, because they always depict it as his fiance or lover or what have you.
Except in the original Bride of Frankenstein, because I don't know where they get the body for that one. I think Dr. Pretorius just kind of makes her almost whole cloth. I'm talking the Universal version.
Yeah. It's actually the same actress plays Mary Shelley in the opening part, but I don't think it doesn't tell you where they get the body though, right?
I don't recall. I don't think so. Elsa Lanchester, who plays both of them in the original Bride of Frankenstein, but it becomes an iconic thing that they do with like the Branagh version of this, and of course this one, and it's now become second nature. The Frankenstein stories, when you want to put the Bride of Frankenstein in there, it's usually Frankenstein's fiance, wife, lover, what have you.
And the Bride of Frankenstein always kills herself pretty close to when she's made in every version that I've seen.
Yeah. Hopefully Maggie Gyllenhaal's movie that's coming out soon will do that.
Yeah, because this is an interesting character, and then it always just she screams and then kills herself, or she burns herself up in Branagh's version, and
that won't happen. That won't happen again. I'll tell you that, because now it's a different world, and the woman Frankenstein is not going to just scream at her own visage.
But when she first comes to life in this one though, she looks at Frankenstein and she's like likes him, she's not scared of him or anything. She's like, and then he's like, and then Victor Frankenstein's like, I'm Victor Frankenstein, and then she's conflicted,
Yeah, I'll have to look at when Frankenhooker came out. Maybe they borrowed some ideas from that one.
Yeah.
That's definitely there. Yeah, there's definitely. I mean,
I guess
go away. I mean, there's always. Even just this year, we had Frankenhooker right around this time, but this past year we had not one but two Frankenstein, female Frankenstein-ish figures out there. We had Emma Stone as a Franken creature.
Poor Thing. That was a good movie. Like Poor Things, yeah.
And then we had Lisa Frankenstein, which I don't know if y'all seen that movie, but it's delightful.
Yeah, I started watching it, but it was a situation where I wasn't able to finish it. But it was, from what I could tell, it looked like a pretty good movie.
It is good. Finish it, Watkins. It's really great. I love Catherine Newton so much in that movie. She is incredible, and I'll see anything she is in. But yeah, the modern Prometheus will never leave us, because those concerns are always with us. But let's talk about Mary Shelley for a minute here, because
I was about to mention that too.
That was a whole thing in the middle act, because when he can't save the girl from being executed, who, by the way, the girl played by Roger Corman's granddaughter. I think her name was Catherine Corman.
She was pretty good. She's pretty good in this too.
Yeah, so he gets to kill his granddaughter in this movie. And when that fails, he gets thrown by an angry mob into a lake, and then he gets out from that and gets found by Mary Shelley, played by Bridget Fonda, who probably, I think at this point, was hot off of her performance in Single White Female. Uh, and she probably took this part in this movie because she is a dedicated horror fan. She also had a cameo as one of the Lindas in the Evil Dead trilogy, specifically Army of Darkness.
Right.
And so she takes him, and he tells her everything, because I think at this point he's kind of given up on trying to change the past. He tells her everything. He even takes Mary Shelley for a ride in his future car all over the countryside in front of every human being, and these little peasants with their sickles seeing, oh, this demon car flying around everywhere.
You know, you think he'd be worried about somebody trying to steal the car after seeing it, you know?
I think that car cannot run without him, because nobody else even tries that. I mean, he lets Bridget Fonda, I think, he lets Mary Shelley, I think, drive it at one point. But I'm pretty sure he can like make that happen, because I got a feeling that he wouldn't have just left his car unattended. I feel like you have to kind of thumbprint to activate that thing. I mean,
probably some kind of DNA thing going on.
Yeah, this is a Knight Rider car we're talking about here. This thing's got some tech. Come on.
So
funny how, and this is, like I said, where we get that whole techno-Victorian thing going on that I think culminates in the end when they go to the future, bringing some of the Victorian to the icy future tundra world. So I love how all of that just kind of blends together, and it's a kind of aesthetic that's not really done in live action movies, except for Poor Things, but it's done brilliantly in anime. In a lot of different anime properties, specifically Vampire Hunter D and Hunter D Bloodlust. But it's an aesthetic I think we should do more of.
One thing about the Mary Shelley's character, when it's first introduced, he looks her up on his card. It says she is the mistress of Lord Byron, and I guess eventually the wife of Percy Shelley. But I can't find anything. I think they just pulled that out of their ass, because I can't find anything online about saying that was any truth to it. You know, I think it's very fabricated, which is an odd choice. You know.
Yeah, it might be, but I don't know. I don't remember that being not a thing. But I think maybe that has to do with kind of some gossip that was going on because of that kind of famous weekend that they all spent out in the house of, because, for those of you out there who don't know, Mary Shelley apparently conceived of the book Frankenstein when her lover, Percy Shelley, and I guess her other lover, Lord Byron, and a couple other folks all got together for a weekend, got super drunk and super high, and basically tried to outdo each other with ghost stories over one stormy night. And the story goes is that after that one long debaucherous night, Mary Shelley had an idea, and that idea was Frankenstein. And
they made two movies about that too, the same year. Gothic and I think Haunted Summers. I think is what's going on.
Yeah, you're right. And the more famous version of that, I think, is which I almost watched the other day, but thought better of it. The more famous version of it was Gothic.
That's right. Gothic.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, I've got a copy. I saw it a long time ago. I do have an upgraded, like a Vestron copy of it.
Oh, I haven't got that.
Yeah,
I got like a really old crappy copy. I think mine's 4.3.
I don't know how good it is. I mean, it's a Blu-ray upgrade, but so a lot of those Vestron ones aren't necessarily the best ever, but it is better than a SD, a standard definition.
Certainly. In fact, that movie might be Conversations in Horror future episode, because
will be, because I completely forgot it should be on our list. It's actually a really good movie to put on our list.
Yeah. So I do love that when he meets Lord Byron, supposed lover of Mary Shelley, who practiced free love back in those days, as they called it. Nowadays we just call it sleeping around or polyamory, if you want to be technical. Lord Byron sees him and he's like, hi, he says, I'm a scientist. And you're an American. Well, yes. I thought all American scientists were named Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
I find that funny.
Yeah.
But Mary Shelley has already started writing the book, but hasn't finished it. But like most time travelers in such movies, he's always like talking about things as if it's already happened, because to him it's already happened. And he keeps trying to encourage her to read it, and then he freaking prints the whole daggum thing. Because he's got a printer in his car and shows it to her.
So where's the paper even come from in the printer? Because it's like,
Well, they cut down the freaking rainforest, so where is the paper coming from? I don't know. That would be weirdly ironic that he's using paper from the last rainforest to make Mary Shelley's would be the first copy of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And
he's like, she don't have to write it now. He just hands her the book,
Yeah, like he literally, and as far as I know, he left it with her when he left the time period. So, for all we know, wow, that's what we call a causal loop, where like Mary Shelley wrote the first few chapters of Frankenstein, but the rest were basically copied. We're to believe that in this reality, it was transcribed from this copy from the future.
It's kind of like AI, It's like an early version of AI, I guess.
Yeah, it's a mind-blowing idea if you think about it. But
you shouldn't think too much about it. It's a Roger
she seems kind of opposed to she's kind of receptive to the idea at first, but then she kind of starts to back away from it and says she wants to live her own life. But then after that, she like has sex with John Hurt's character. So.
Oh yeah, that's the thing that happens. That is a thing that happens, and I don't know how I feel about that. It does kind of sort of remind me a little bit, now that I think about it, of Time After Time with Malcolm McDowell, where he played H.G. Wells, who went back in time. Actually, no, he went forward in time, and fell in love with a modern liberated woman, and has sex with Mary Steenburgen. Except in that version, he's chasing Jack the Ripper, and in this version, he's same kind of character, except he's chasing the Frankenstein monster. So they all connect somehow. Maybe, I don't know, maybe because that movie came out in '86, I think. So maybe the writers and Corman were kind of aping that a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that. I think I read that, didn't Michael McDowell marry Steenburgen? Didn't they? They got married or something, or have kids together? I think.
Oh yeah, they did. They were married very briefly, and he is still the father of her children. So, and I read a thing actually. I think Mary Steenburgen's birthday was today. Actually, now that I think about it, and she said, "Yeah, I don't regret making that movie because my kids exist because of it."
Yeah.
And Malcolm they're still friends apparently after all these years, and she said that it's still a great movie, and she loved making it. So it's not horror though, so we'll probably never talk about it. Although the Jack the Ripper stuff is kind of horrifying.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard, more science fiction, but so the middle part of the movie, it reminds me a lot of Roger Corman's other movies, like his Poe movies in a way. But everything looks a lot better than it did then in a way, because it's not sets. It seems like it's like real locations. There's a lot of exterior shots, and there's just a lot bigger budget than he ever had, I don't think. So a lot of it looks a lot better. But it is kind of it's an interesting lull in the middle. It's not necessarily a lull, but it is there's not like a lot of action in the middle when he goes to Mary Shelley's place and all that for a little while.
You're right. No, it's more of a character building thing. Like I said, the whole him trying to elicit her help, basically. In a weird way, I'm not sure what she could do, but anyway, like that's why he printed the book. He's basically trying to show her what the future is, because she wrote the book apparently not to. He's discovering that he had no idea that this book was real. He had no idea it was based on a true story, and he's living it right now. But she actually, I think, influences him in his journey more than he her, because they have this whole conversation about what he believes, and that's when we find out, like, she asks him, so you don't believe in God? He's like, I don't know. And then she says, science is your religion. And that's when he kind of pauses, because he doesn't have a good answer for that.
That is interesting, that because he does eventually go into the God at the end, and he is a scientist, so it is kind of a two conflicting points of view, and the way that he ends up, I guess at the end, he kind of ends up in a way that he's not in control of anything that's going on. So in a way, he has to kind of say that the monster is an abomination to God, and that's why he has to destroy it.
Well, yeah, and Victor tells him in his dying breath to destroy it. And so in a way, Victor completes his arc when he realizes what a terrible mistake he's made. And he falls to Buchanan to try to correct that mistake. I emphasize the word try.
Yeah.
Because this whole kind of thing builds to the climax on this old church where, the monster has killed Elizabeth and has said, make me a mate. And Frankenstein's like, you know what, I can, but I need power, and I know exactly where to get it. So that's when they El Kabong, knock knock Buchanan on the head and basically steal his car and his laser to make, because he brought some of it with him in the car, to make some electricity to come in and zap another creature to life, which he makes from the dead body of Elizabeth, very much like Branagh's version later. And that's where he is forced to kind of be complicit in Victor's dealings and have more conversations with the monster. And we get a creation scene, which every Frankenstein movie has to have.
That lab looks really good in this movie too.
Oh, there is much more of that lab too that was cut, because in the trailer you see like more stuff from the lab. You see like a hand inside a jar in the trailer, which is cool. And
B-roll they cut out, yes.
oh yeah, you know they shot tons of stuff and they never made it into the movie. But this is where Julia gets to shine and do the line, because this movie takes place after the original creature is created. So this is the point where we have to put that point in where he says, "It's alive!" And boy, oh boy, does he say it in such a great way, straight to the camera, down the barrel, and we get it full blast. We get full Julia in this.
But Dr. Frankenstein kind of forces him to help. He forces John Carpenter's character to help him create the second monster, and he's kind of out of control, really, in a way. And then when he listens to him when he tells him he needs to kill the other monster. So it's kind of it's like, why he doesn't necessarily have to listen to him, but at the same, it's not like he created like a bond with the other doctor, because the other doctor was kind of forcing him to do the work. So. Yeah. Actually, at that point, in his grief over Elizabeth, Victor says interesting things. Like he starts to look at her dead body and say, "We aren't very well made. In fact, I think I made some wonderful improvements." So at that point, he starts to remember. You have to remember, like, the reason probably why he wanted to make a monster to begin with. He probably thought, disease and death, and and I don't know what compelled him to make extra fingers too. He's probably like, "This pinky is useless. We need to replace it with something." Real finger.
So I guess that's part of what scientists, sometimes inventors and entrepreneurs and billionaires with lots of money, sometimes do, for better and ill. They look at a need, they look at a deficiency in our world, and they try to improve on things. They think we can make something bigger, we can make something stronger, we can make something faster. If we can make it so that, we can transcend the limits of our physical bodies and our puny minds. They don't look at the human. Let's narrow it down to the medically speaking, the human body. They don't see perfection when they see it. They only see they see something that can grow, that can evolve, that can change, and maybe turn into something better. They never think of it's getting worse over time, but they see, I think it's kind of feeds into sort of the idea of transhumanism a little bit, which is kind of the heart of what Mary Shelley sort of pioneered with her book, is Frankenstein becoming basically the first human to create a being that not just creates new life, but also creates immortality for humanity. Because if you can put a dead man's brain in a body that's stitched together from other pieces and make it live, why can't you put a dead man's brain into some other fully formed human body and make that live? You totally could. And you could basically make people live 10 times longer. As a matter of fact, maybe this was a total fabrication, but I read an article somewhere that somewhere in some lab somewhere, they are hard at work and almost very close to making the first human head transplant a thing. So we're still working on that, and we're very close to making a Frankenstein type thing with our bodies.
Yeah, and so and other than like Frankenstein's, like the Frankenstein story is not necessarily about money, but the story at the beginning with John Hurt's character, his stuff was financed, and so it was more about how the financiers took his technology and they tried to do something different with it, which I guess is never really touched with a Frankenstein. That could happen too with the Frankenstein's technology. Try to do something better and then create a time anomaly like what happens in this movie. But
oh yeah,
but like in Poor Things too, like they're able to do a brain transplant into her, and then it starts as a I guess she starts out as a baby with a baby's brain in her head.
Yeah, problematic.
But if you look at it's a situation where like if you're getting a head transplant, I guess you'd almost have to have a body that wasn't that damaged that you could transfer. I guess it would have to be a brain dead body, which I guess that happens with car accidents and stuff. It could be a good thing, I guess, if it would work out. It may not lead to there's always the possibility of someone trying, which is I guess it happens in a lot of horror movies, or someone trying to kill somebody on purpose to get their bodies, they change brains with them,
They'll just change their electromagnetic pulses from one brain to the next, so you don't have to worry about the squishy part of the brain that move from one skull to the next.
Right. I would think there'd be a lot of trauma involved in having your brain or your head move to a different body. It would probably, I think it'd be a very traumatic experience.
Yeah, they did RoboCop 2.
Yeah. Right. Which I just got a new copy of that movie yesterday from the Spring Factory. They got a 4K version of it. Take a look at it.
Right. So I said earlier that there are parts of this movie that make me think of a bygone era of filmmaking in a weird way. And I'm sure there's others, but the first thing that comes to my mind, and I want to ask what y'all's opinion is, like, there's a weird dream sequence in this movie.
There's three of them, actually.
Yeah. But like both of them, I think, are done in this weird kind of not sepia tone, but it's like looking through like underwater, basically.
Yeah. There's some kind of wavy looking thing in front of the lens, maybe like Vaseline on the lens. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, and it reminds me of since I Pit the Pendulum, exactly. But it's fresh in my mind. I'm like, wow, that looks very much like Pit the Pendulum. So that all these dream sequences feel to me like like they were made in the 60s. So this is like 60s era film technologies putting in a late 80s movie.
Yeah, there's like some weird guy in there with some weird makeup on saying some nonsense, but I really think that's Roger Corman though. That's like classic Roger Corman, and that's like I don't, because there's three dream sequences and they never like do anything with them past the third one, where after he falls in the water and I guess Mary Shelley and them and Byron and they show up in the dream sequence with him, but it's almost like that could be something if they were going to go forward past this movie and continue with a Doctor Who sort of thing, that could be something maybe connecting the time loop, whatever the time interference is. It could be something to do with that. But I think it's just Roger Corman saying, "Hey, I like dream sequences that look cool. I'm going to throw this in there." But it could be involved. It could be a connection to if the scriptwriter, if they wrote this in there, it could be a connection to explain or. I really think I think there's any evidence in this movie that this is happening, but I think it'd be a good idea to connect the time loops to the character and the time loops. It's not really a loop; it's like a time vortex, whatever it is. Connecting it in a way that there's something more to it that is controlled by something else that and it might be like part. I don't think it's thought enough ahead. I really but I think that would be a way to do it.
The third dream sequence, I think, is the one that stands out the most because it's kind of freaky. It's just like the people surround him laying in bed, and he's got some stitchings on his belly, and he's smiling at them. And Mary Shelley says, "An abomination in the eyes of God," and he wakes up. And of course, that I think is meant to kind of reinforce the theme of the monster and the man who makes him, this creator and creation kind of blurring together. Because that is one thing that has haunted the story of Frankenstein and all future versions of it. And although this movie ends up making a fairly clear distinction between the man and the monster, especially when John Hurt creates the time laser and is able to open the time vortex again and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I want you to meet my monster." And he shoots the laser and opens up, because that is the monster he created, except his monster was more destructive.
Yeah,
But
significantly more destructive.
oh yeah, but so because he's the Oppenheimer of this whole thing, destroyer of worlds. But yeah, the thing that keeps haunting is the idea of people keep, for better or worse, they keep misinterpreting, keep naming the monster Frankenstein, and
People in the
not
movie do,
no, I mean
or in general. Yeah.
in all future versions. I mean, it's the same even in the toy lines. We still call the monster Frankenstein, even though the creator is Frankenstein, and the poor creature never gets a name, at least in most versions. He definitely doesn't get one in this version,
Yeah.
but yeah.
It just sounds cool though, Frankenstein. And if you have an action figure of Dr. Frankenstein, it's not going to sell very good, you know.
I don't know about you. I'd probably, if they made a Peter Cushing, like the Hammer Peter Cushing version of Frankenstein, buy that.
Yeah.
Come on, they'll make a Kenneth Branagh action figure, and people will love that one.
Well, I'm saying collectors will like it, but kids aren't going to like it. Man. I mean, it's like they like the green big monster thing, you know.
I don't think NECA figures caters mostly to kids. That's where I get most of my classic monsters. I'm looking at them right now. I got a whole shelf full of them, and they're all in black and white. Apparently NECA is going to release a deluxe Christopher Lee.
I saw that. Yeah, honestly, it looks pretty.
Yeah, cool. Gotta get
that. Yeah.
I don't really buy many action figures anymore. Sorry, guys.
Why you gotta be lame, yo?
I don't necessarily buy a lot of them either. I thought it looked pretty cool though, but I'm not against it. You know, I ended up getting a few Scream Factory ones just because it was like a thing. I'm definitely not going to
keep that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be Debbie Downer, and he likes collecting them a lot. Like tons of people like collecting them. You know.
Oh yeah, I know.
About to get canceled, man.
I understand. I mean, yeah, after the market got oversaturated in the 90s, I understand. Yeah. But this movie, we have no segue. So back to she says, so the car says that because of Buchanan's experiments with time and space, this is where we use the same. Oh yeah, he's trying to figure out if he can get it back to his time. That's what he really wants to do, of course. If we could just get back to our time, and also in the process destroy Frankenstein, because I think his plan is he's going to take Frankenstein and his monsters back to the modern day, which would have been really weird.
Yeah.
Then because the monster would run amok in like New Los Angeles in 2030. Yikes! That would have been an interesting sequence. But
I think but and then he has to leave the car, which kind of sucks. But I guess they wouldn't have worked driving it in the snow. It might have. It's a pretty badass car, but
yeah, it is kind of sad when she says goodbye, Dr. Buchanan. Oh, she's gonna get vaporized basically. But like she says, time and space are now unbound.
Does the car get vaporized when it happens?
Yeah, I think it does. Because I think like basically, I guess what they're led to lead us to believe is that only parts of the cathedral are absorb. It's kind of like how in Terminator or Terminator 2, when the time hole just opens up and it's this big black ball of electricity, and I think when the T-1000 shows up, it opens up right in the middle of a chain link fence, and when the chain dissipates, there's T-1000 sitting there crouched in the hole naked, but like all the outline of the ball has made this like cut in the chain link fence. It's just vaporized everything around that happened to be in that sphere of annihilation or whatever. So I think it's the same concept. But like it made that like if someone were a bystander to this thing, they would just see a big giant thing of light and then just like a big crater where this church what this church was, and maybe a little bit of rocks and stuff where the corner of the foundation was or something, and that would be it. So yeah, I think that's what happened to it. It's sad.
Yes. So he has after that, he really has no way of at all controlling the time vortexes once he gets into the Snowmageddon place at the end.
Yeah, he's trying. Yeah, poor Frankenstein's like, make us go back. He's like, I can't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. I don't know. Buchanan doesn't seem like a very particularly competent scientist. things forward very well.
I mean, it'd be pretty bad to be back in, what is it, 1817, but it's even worse being in a snow-covered landscape with nothing. And so, I don't know. I mean, I guess like the lifespans back. He's kind of in a cushy place, though, in a way, though, because he was socializing with the upper class type of people. Once he sold his ring and got $50, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, what I think is funny though is going back to Doctor Who, is like when they're trying to figure out how we're gonna go back to the future. In the car before the car says that tearful goodbye and gets annihilated. And she says time and space are unbound. They do say what did I say? Like the car literally does say if you reverse the polarity. And oh gosh.
Yeah.
It's always reverse the polarity.
Yeah. I wonder where they got that from. I don't know.
It's always reverse the polarity. So yeah, this is oh gosh, yeah. So but from here on we are rolling, and I feel like this is the kind of third act climax is where we get the full kind of scope of the techno-Victorian stuff, and the creature kills Victor, and the poor Frankenstein's bride kills herself by taking a bullet to the chest, and
yeah. Well, that happens first, and then he kills Victor before he kills Victor, for some reason. I don't know. Well, I don't even know John Hurt's character's name. I should call him John Hurt's character. But for some reason, he decides to jump on Frankenstein. Like, what was he thinking? I mean, not Frankenstein. He jump on the monster. He tried to jump on him, and it's like, I mean, you're about to get killed acting like that. I don't know what you're thinking.
He was trying desperately to save Frankenstein, I guess. I don't know. Maybe in his back of his mind, he thought, I don't know, maybe if I can save Victor Frankenstein, he can help me save the world, because maybe us two geniuses we can put our brains together and we can figure out a way to stop the time vortex or something. I don't know. Yeah. But he becomes kind of this wandering hero who tries to, and this is where we catch up with the flashback part. He's trying to find the monster across this frozen waste, which incidentally is parallels to the real Mary Shelley's Frankenstein book, because that's kind of what happens to Victor at the end of that book. He chases the creature all the way to the Arctic, and that's where his story kind of ends. And that's the same thing here, except that he manages to come and find this hatch in the middle of the ice, and the hatch leads to...
It's kind of like Lost when that happens.
Yeah. Underground laboratory, which apparently is a computer that recognizes him. And like, hello, Dr. Buchanan. And then just cool laser effects all over the place.
Yeah, it was very bizarre, and it almost seemed like it was going somewhere, or some kind of explanation, but I don't know what was up with it exactly.
My theory is that Tom's brain work. Okay, my theory is that either this is in fact Buchanan's lab, because we never really did get a good glimpse of it in the original timeline. We just got a glimpse of the testing ground where the brass from the military are going to see how it works. And we saw the exterior of his house. We never actually went into Buchanan's house in the future in 2030. We never do. So it's possible that this underground place, maybe that was the basement of his house, and maybe after the snow covered it, maybe the people of the new post-apocalyptic civilization kept it running for him. That's one theory. It's going
to be like the technology with a car where it just takes care of itself. Not necessarily people taking care of itself, but it could be that.
Well, here's the thing, though, and I just realized that theory number 2 is probably a little more likely, and which is that because of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff happening, and because of the time explosions, the time tornado messing up things in 2030, creating this Ice Age world, also created an alternate timeline where that timeline's version of Dr. Buchanan didn't get stuck through the time hole, but stuck around and basically created from his lab this thing that the monster, pop, there he is, he's there already, says this is the brain of the great city, the lost refuge of mankind. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, that this timeline is a new timeline, and there is a alternate Dr. Buchanan who made this brain that keeps the city going, which would be ironic considering that he created the thing that destroyed civilization, and now he's trying to redeem himself by creating the thing that's the brain that's keeping the last of the human race alive.
Yeah,
So
it's not enough. There's not enough evidence either way, and it's like it's kind of a. I don't know how much. And there obviously had been some thought into what was going on with it, but it seems like there should have been a little more of an explanation about what if there was an alternate timeline or not. I don't necessarily want it spelled out, but it's some kind of evidence showing that it was an alternate timeline, or I mean. Or if it's the same timeline, like you were saying, like if you go back in the past, no matter what you do, it already happened to begin with.
Yeah, there's so many theories you could attach to it. And
this movie, I don't think this movie tries to be that smart with it. As far as I can tell, but
no, it doesn't. It doesn't, because really, it just builds to this really neat little climax where he fights the monster in a super high tech laser show with also a musket ball pistol, which on paper that should be super lame, but somehow because of Roger Corman, I think it's one of the coolest things he's ever done. I don't know why. I think it's just something about the figure that John Hurd cuts with the puffy shirt against these circuitry and lasers and darkness in the back as he takes that musket ball, and the creature, asks him, "Who are you?" And he says, I am Frankenstein, and he shoots the monster.
Yeah, that was kind of like was it? What the hell is it? I am all the Jedi movement, or what was that? What was that other one that was?
That you're thinking of Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. That's Rise of Skywalker. So there's another movie though where there's another franchise about the same time when they said I am. She's like, I am all the Jedi, and then I don't know. I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah,
but obviously this happened before that. But they tended. I guess it was a kind of a powerful moment, but but it's. I still hate it. I hated that he couldn't get along with the monster, didn't he? He just like shoots the motherfucker.
You just wanted it to be a buddy comedy by the end.
Yeah. Well, I guess I wanted the monster to be more of if he's going to shoot him. And the monster was there trying to have a conversation with him, and then he shoots him in the head,
Yeah, honestly, though, I think Buchanan, first of all, he's got to make do. I think he's one of these guys who's like, I got to make do on my promise. I promised to kill this motherfucker. So that's what I'm going to do. But also, I think he's a little scared for the human race. Because
the monster's pretty close to him. He could kill him pretty quick if he really wanted to, but he is trying to talk to him about something. But
I think what I'm trying to get at is like he's afraid for the human race because the monster, I guess he was having conversations with the computer before Buchanan got there. The monster was the one who tells him this is the brain of the great city, the last refuge of mankind. And I think the way he says mankind kind of is a little sinister. That maybe there's an inclination that the monster will inevitably be drawn to mankind. As much as he tries to keep himself isolated and alone, he's going to end up making contact with humanity, and all that's going to end up happening is he's going to freaking kill people because is what happens. And in this version, he is no longer afraid of fire, because we've got to mention there is a mob with torches scene in this movie because it's a Frankenstein movie. There has to be a mob with torches scenes in this movie. And they try to, get him, and the fire, at first he's like, fire bad, but then he's like, forget it, just rips a guy's heart out, and he's no longer afraid of fire anymore. So
he rips off a guy's head, and then he grabs another guy's arm and rips it off, which is a pretty awesome sequence.
It is pretty awesome. It's the only bit of gore in this movie, aside from dead sheep, that the monster ate, which I guess makes it a little chupacabra-ish in this version.
They were still moving around too. He didn't even finish it. So
ew, gross. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I guess that might be more upsetting than anything else you see in this movie. But
it was probably cheaper to do like a live sheep than like to make a fake sheep. So they like it's probably why they had him still alive like that.
Yeah, that's probably true. The but the thing that's cool is like you not only just shoot him in the head and you think, oh, that got him. Oh no, it doesn't. Zoom in on the stitched together eyeball that opens. Bam, he's alive and comes back.
Yeah. It's like at that point you're screwed, you know. You shot something in the head thinking you're good, and then it keeps coming, you know.
Yeah, still coming. He's like Jason Voorhees, the monster die. And that's where this movie kind of settles because he uses the lasers, because in the end everything's about lasers in this movie, to kill the monster in this really cool kind of but also kind of very 90s way where he basically uses the clapper. He controls the lasers through the clapper. But because he's John Hurt, he's able to put some kind of theatrical flourish into it. He's more like a conductor with an orchestra with these lasers.
Yeah. He's definitely doing it. Yeah, he was doing it like that.
Yeah.
He knew how to use the lasers, so that was technology from his time, you know.
Oh yeah. Obviously, he had some kind of familiarity with this, so that makes me think that he has seen this lab before in some form. I think this was his lab, but it's just a future's version, this new version of it. That's still pretty much the same. Maybe that's. Oh gosh, maybe this was like his home security system.
Yeah.
Like imagine a burglar trying to come into his home in 2030 and then the laser just slices him off. Imagine like severed lasered heads on the floor when he gets home. Oh gosh.
But that while he's killing the monster says something like what you do understand is you can't kill me, but then I guess he dies after that, but he kills the bride of Frankenstein pretty easily. She gets shot in the chest and dies. But this one takes a little bit longer to kill. But at the same time, he says he can't kill him. But so maybe he didn't die. It doesn't show him moving or anything later on. But
it's much more than that. I think, Dave, because I think that this is in a weird way sort of a homage to Halloween, and I'll explain myself. I explain myself. Okay, so. In the original Halloween, Michael Myers gets shot by Dr. Loomis and falls and goes flat on the ground. And Jamie Lee Curtis says that immortal line, "What's the boogeyman?" And of course, Dr. Loomis says, as a matter of fact, that was. And he goes over to see the body. The body is gone. And John Carpenter has the breathing of Michael Myers in every room of the house and even outside. He never meant to imply that Michael Myers just got up and walked away. He meant to imply, and Carpenter has said this on numerous occasions, so I'm not just making this up, guys. He meant to imply that at that moment, Michael Myers, the shape of evil, has transcended his physical body. Because now that his body is dead, he's everywhere. He could be anywhere, anytime. And like a ghost that can appear and disappear at will, which he kind of could do already. But anyway, so the idea is like he's everywhere now. So I think that same kind of thing is going on with the monster, because by the time this movie ends, the monster is a symbol, a personification of all the monsters that science makes when they don't think about the consequences, when they don't think about the morality of what they are making, and they just recklessly pursue things that ultimately will result in destruction and pain. And that's why when he gets out of that hatch and sees the great city, the last refuge of mankind, that looks like this cool, like steampunk techno Wizard of Oz type Emerald City, basically.
Yeah. It's kind of reminded me of like the Never Ending Story a little bit, and I saw that.
Oh yeah. So he's walking towards it. Buchanan's just walking towards it, but he's walking towards it fearfully, because the monster's voice is now in his head. And it's telling him, "You can't kill me. I am unbound."
Yeah, he does say that in the narration. I guess it's technically in his head, but there's a little bit of hope at the end. He's found a place, and you think he's really just screwed. He's going to have to live his life out in a hatch underground. But I guess it turns out there is a big city. But he's got the monsters in his head to contend with. That's an interesting theory, though.
Yeah, because the monster is now with him no matter where he goes. And if you think about it, for the sake of the human race, it's probably better off that Buchanan just stays in that freaking hatch.
Yeah.
Wherever he goes, destruction will follow in his wake.
Yeah, he does tend to make a tear up stuff, and but the thing is, he's got good intentions,
and they always end up going to.
Yeah, he's got very good intentions, and he's always putting himself in danger to try to save people or things, or try to stop something that he doesn't think is right, but it always backfires on him.
So if you think about it, then if they did make this into a series, this would basically just be like the depressing version of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
He would just go from situation to situation, make whatever's bad there worse, and every time he leaves someplace, he blow it up. Basically, I do kind of want to read Dracula Unbound, the sequel to this, just to see how it ends up, what ends up happening, because you can kind of almost see, even with this ending, which I'm not sure if that's at all what was in Brian Aldiss' version, but I could almost see in this ending them like find the last city of the great city maybe also having to contend with an I Am Legend type scenario where there's like freaking vampires everywhere at the outside the city, freaking ice vampires, and Dracula is their leader in his castle that came through a time hole like decades ago, just perched on the mountain and that would be super cool too. But
I think for him to go to Dracula, though, he needs to go back in time. But it could be like some kind of scenario like that at where he's going, though. That would be a cool type of, because it's gonna be like a very futuristic looking city, and then there's like weird kind of alien sort of stuff going on there,
Yeah. I don't know if Netflix though will buy the idea of let's just do depressing Doctor Who, because that's kind of what this would end up being.
Well, I don't know if you would go that route. Like I was saying before, I think what the best thing, they should have used Jason Patrick as that character, and he could have, instead of having him as Byron, and it could have been more. It could have been a more like hero-ish character.
That's a good day, Watkins. I didn't think about that till now, but yeah, now that I think about it, Jason Patrick probably would have been a better choice to play Buchanan.
I mean, he was there anyway. You might as well have done it.
Yeah, I don't know if this Lost Boys. When did Lost Boys come out?
Was it 1987? It was 80.
Oh, is it 87?
Yeah. So he was just he did that, and it's a few years later. So he was kind of hot. They got him in this, so he was kind of I don't know how. After Lost Boys,
was hot. I just think he was in popular movies.
Yeah. But that's so Well, that's what. Yeah, he was in a popular movie, but he was I guess he was another, like he was in Speed 2. He's the main character in it. So,
that's not a movie you should miss.
Really bad. Dude. He did really bad, but there was something else. There was something else he did though. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, he would have been a good choice. Not that. Obviously, I think that they had a different take on it, and Roger Corman did what he wanted to do with the character. The character is probably closer to his age, and he wanted to kind of go that type of route with the character. But I think it would have been more successful had they gone younger, but it wouldn't have been the same, obviously, because you point out a lot of things with the character's arc, especially him being a scientist and him like thinking about trying to fix things and trying to realize. God's in charge of certain things, and kind of coming to that conclusion later on, where that would, it doesn't necessarily, that's what happens in this movie, but it doesn't necessarily like translate in a very satisfactory way to most audience members, I would think.
Yeah, I do think this movie is kind of over the head of a lot of people. It's like we said, like there's some way. Well, no, I'm serious about this. There's some ways in which this movie is very smart, and then there are other ways this movie in which is kind of is very dumb and doesn't sketch out things. So I feel like, for better or worse, this movie kind of is everything that like a final film by a great filmmaker usually ends up being. I mean, look at Kubrick's last movie, Eyes Wide Shut.
I love that movie. Don't be knocking that movie. The movie's brilliant.
It has all of his best traits and some of his worst traits. You can debate as to how much in a given scene, but he poured it all. It's his most Kubrickian movie, I think, for sure. And that was his last gasp. You can say some similar things about other filmmakers too. And this is all we have now. This is Frankenstein Unbound, which, by the way, we haven't mentioned the title is an allusion to Greek mythology, because there is a famous book called Prometheus Unbound, And I think is a reference to the fact that when Prometheus was bound up in hell, Hercules came and unbound him. He broke his chains and basically redeemed him from his crimes against Zeus and everything. And the original title to Frankenstein was The Modern Prometheus, because Prometheus was the Titan who stole fire from the gods. And similar way that Frankenstein steals the power of life from our creator. And so that's kind of where that is. So now the idea being that the Frankenstein literally and metaphorically is no longer bound to the 1800s. He's no longer bound to 2030. He's everywhere all at once now. He is unbound.
I just thought it meant Frankenstein just off the chain or something like that.
That's pretty much how I took
assumed that it said.
Yeah, well, it has a more literate interpretation. I forgot to mention too that the monster has a cool line where he says, "This world you made, it's better than Victor's. It is
Right,
cold."
that's right before he shoots him in the face.
Yeah. It's cold as I am cold, lonely as I am lonely. And it's funny because the monster shows the monster is somehow cognizant that all of this frozen waste is somehow his fault, is Buchanan's fault. You know, I guess the computer told him that. Also, I think it's hilarious that the laser, like they shear off the monster's arm with the laser beam.
Oh yeah.
Tears his own arm off and tries to beat Buchanan with it.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he does do that, and it's
pretty wild.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. It takes a lot to kill this monster. You know, it's like funny how the other one, like she gets shot in the chest and she dies immediately. Him, he can rip his arm off and beat people with it, and he's still going.
Victor built him very strong.
Yes.
But I do think that in most versions of the Frankenstein monster is just immortal. You cannot kill him. And I think the reasoning is pretty sound, which is that, I mean, depending on which version or depending on the methodology that they use to create him, the monster is life from death. Technically speaking, he started off dead. So
there would always be a problem with the flesh rotting, you would think, though, like just that.
Yeah, I guess, but because he's got the electricity, that gives him life. And no matter what you do, that's just gonna endure, because, like I said, somehow, I mean, the methodology that Frankenstein uses to create the monster never really matters. In fact, and if you read the book, Mary Shelley doesn't really describe very in detail of any kind, like how the monster is made. I mean, there's a suggestion that he is stitched together from dead bodies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about alchemy and stuff, because alchemy was big back then. If you don't know what that is, folks, Google that sucker. But anyway, so there's almost as much magic going on as there was science in the original Frankenstein. It's really a metaphor for a lot of things. It's not meant to be totally taken literally. So I think this idea that Victor Frankenstein somehow figured out how to take the life, the power of giving life from the heavens and bring it down to earth was a super powerful thing that created this creature that cannot die, because he is life from death. He is immortal. He's kind of a Christ figure in a way. And James Whale leaned into that in the first Frankenstein movie, because the idea that when Christ was resurrected, he had a resurrected body, a body that cannot die anymore. He already went through death. So the same way, I think Frankenstein's monster already went through death. He was born from death, so he cannot die. And in this movie, not only can he not die, he is, even if his body is destroyed, his spirit, or at least the idea of him, will always live in the minds of men who want to tempt fate and try to be gods.
Okay, guys. You got any final thoughts on Frankenstein Unbound? Because we've gone through this pretty damn thoroughly.
I'll let you go first, Watkins.
Put me on the spot there. I did have a thought, but it went away. But I guess as far as I never did say what my impression of the movie was. So the first time I watched it, I did like it a lot. This time I remembered a lot of the scenes from when I saw it, like however many years ago that was, a long time ago. And then so I mean, I've always thought it was very imaginative. I like the time rip aspects of it. Some of the effects are now fairly dated, but for what it was, I guess about my big question about the movie is it didn't do very good in the theater. And why do you guys think that is?
I think you hit upon it earlier. I think it was a question of timing, Watkins, and because, like you said, like the next year, Edward Scissorhands came out. 2 years later, like I feel like
It was like the next month Edward Scissorhands came out
oh
and
yeah,
it
well,
rocked the shit.
Yeah,
so
but the thing was, Edward Scissorhands is more or less a film that was by Tim Burton, who was big at the time. It had
yeah,
Johnny Depp and it had Winona Ryder, who were really hot actors at
Yeah.
the time. But
yeah.
it really was a Tim Burton,
Right.
film.
Yeah.
I think another thing too we probably haven't touched on is that the late 80s and early 90s, there was a big shift that was going on. And I think Corman would eventually lean into that in the coming years. A shift that another low budget horror meister, Charles Band, had already taken advantage of, which is the home video market. This movie did get a theatrical release. And I think Corman, to probably, usually he was a super savvy businessman, but I think maybe by this time, he had yet to realize that the future of profitable low budget filmmaking was in the home video market.
Well, I
And
think he was kind of like a hired gun on this one, so it wasn't necessarily the studio hired him to do it, so it wasn't him, so
right,
much.
right, but he still produced the thing, and he still, and I think, and you're right. If this had been a New World Pictures where he kind of create like basically started it from beginning to end, I think he probably still would have tried for the theatrical, but like I said, at the time there was this shift from the theatrical model trying to make money theatrically to, if you had a low budget horror movie, you could make more money just going straight to video. And if this movie had gone straight to video, it probably would have made its budget back eventually. Although I don't know, unfortunately, it hasn't been proliferated as much on video. I think a generation of us kids probably discovered it through cable.
That's when I saw it was on
Yeah,
cable.
I saw it through cable too. I didn't watch it. I didn't even pick this movie up when it came on on video. And I usually picked up a lot of movies when they came on video.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I first saw the movie. But
So
to be honest with go ahead.
And also in the end, I feel like it's Roger Corman's legacy is so large, and there's so many other big things that he left a mark on that, unfortunately, for better or worse, this movie is kind of a footnote at the end of it. If it wasn't his last movie, I don't think we would talk about it as much. I do still love it, but upon rewatching it, I don't love it as much. In fact, I noticed though that over all the other movies he's directed seemed to have the same problem, which is the middle acts. They start off really strong and they end really strong, but the middle act kind of tends to wander. And this movie does the same daggum thing. It's got a middling middle act. It's got a banger of an opening and a banger of an ending, and that's it. But yeah, I think that's probably why it's kind of partially doomed to obscurity. But ladies and gentlemen out there, if you can find it, you can find it on the YouTube, which is pretty much the only place you're going to find this for free is the YouTube. Unfortunately, it's not. I don't think it's a high definition version that's on the YouTube, but it's all you can. It's all that's there. And as of this recording, I don't think it's been taken down by anybody. So give it a watch, guys and gals out there. And we were talking earlier about how cool the aesthetic of this movie is, how cool this last little showdown in the laser room was, and I feel like we can elevate the drama of that moment when he shoots the monster in the head. I think we can elevate it a little bit by considering, and you Watkins agree with me partially, that John Hurt's a little miscast. Wouldn't it be funny if Schwarzenegger had played this character? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Schwarzenegger alternator. Because I find there are so many horror movies where we have this moment, like we do in this movie, where the lead character has got a quip before he shoots the thing. Of course, Jaws has Smile, You Son of a Bitch. This movie has I Am Frankenstein. Kevin, I'm going to need your help with this one. I got 4 of these, and I need you to feed me the line, and who are you? So you're playing the monster here, and I'm playing Schwarzenegger as Buchanan.
I always feel like Schwarzenegger should play the monster, but it's...
You know what? I think there was a time where that would have. I think there was a time where that would have been a thing. But you know who before I go on to this, you know who I think would have been, still could be, would be a perfect Frankenstein monster, Dolph Lundgren.
Oh yeah.
Dolph freaking Lundgren would have made
he'd be into that, man, too.
Oh yeah, he would do it. He'd be like, yeah. Or I don't know, maybe I'll do this as Dolph Lundgren. I don't know if this will work, but we're gonna try that. Anyway, so Kevin, when you're ready, give me that. Okay.
And who are you?
I'm your optometrist, and you got something in your eye. My bullet.
Okay.
Does he say that in the movie?
No, he doesn't. This is the alternative line reading.
These are alternative line readings.
The Schwarzenegger alternator. If we can find a cooler line, I got 4 possibilities.
All right, what's the next one?
The next one is, you gotta feed me the line, or it won't sound as cool.
Okay. Who? You gonna let me say it?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it.
And who are you?
I'm the potty pooper. I just ripped it off from Kindergarten Cop.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, number 3.
Party. Ready?
Number 3.
Okay. And who are you?
I'm Lord Byron, and this is my poetry. It'll blow your mind.
That one's not too bad. All right.
Yeah. Number 4.
And who are you?
I'm the guy who's going to send you to God, maybe.
I'm not even going to ask where you come up with some of these things.
That's a good job, Kevin. You play the monster, man.
Oh, yeah. You did a good job, man. I like that voice, man. Yeah. But I still say, I think we're on agreement. Like, Dolph Lundgren, Mr. Sir, if you are listening to this podcast in some way, or your assistant is listening to it, we want you to play the Frankenstein monster at some point. And if Guillermo del Toro's version and Maggie Gyllenhaal's version are a hit, I think you could be the third monster. I mean, Christian Bale's doing it in Gyllenhaal's. Some guy I don't know is doing it in Guillermo del Toro's version. You could be the next one, Mr. Lundgren.
I don't know if we need another Frankenstein anything for a while. That's it. Frankenstein monster keeps getting used and abused.
The one with Dolph Lundgren after all these other ones is going to be like this, where they spend $11 million on it and it makes 300,000. You know,
dude. If they even just did a straight to video version with him as the monster, I would watch that. I would watch the heck out of that.
Oh my god! All right,
if they did an action version of it, I would watch that still. I mean, come on.
All right, so my final thoughts are: it is a shame that the audiences haven't seen this movie enough, and it is not given much more credit than it probably deserves. But it is a late '80s, early '90s film, and the audiences out there's tastes were changing drastically fast. You can say that when the Lost Boys came out, it was minimalism, and the fact that they appealed to young teens. And then, of course, post '90s, you start to see a lot more of teenagers and stars in a lot of the higher brow horror films, of which this was not it. So this movie was stuck in between. Roger Corman couldn't sell his name. No one knew who the heck Roger Corman really was, other than his horror fans by the '90s. Really, if you were talking '60s, '70s, yeah, we know a lot of people knew who Corman was, but by the '90s, to be honest with you, I don't think anyone really cared who Roger Corman was. He produced a bunch of low budget films that were profitable. You're right. I think he probably should have stuck to straight to the DVD market because it was thriving at that time, and he probably could have made a shit ton of money if this had been a movie that was foresaw to have gone straight to video, straight to DVD, which is, I saw it after the fact. So that being said, I mean, it's good to talk about these type of movies because these are the movies that are lost. These are the movies that people aren't talking about. There are, I mean, in my circles, we don't talk about Frankenstein Unbound. I mean, Roger Corman, this whole month of us focusing on Roger Corman movies, the movies that we're focusing on are the ones that he did, the Poe cycle. A lot of people will have seen those. Not a lot of people will have seen this, despite the fact that we all think that Raul Julia is freaking brilliant.
This movie is worth seeing just for him. I mean, for real, it is worth seeing just to see Raul Julia say it's alive.
And it's unfortunate that, as much as the studios tried to make Jason Patric a star, he never ever hit it. I had to look it up, and I had to remember he did. This was his third big movie. His first one was Solar Babies, where he starred. Yeah, no one remembers Solar Babies. It's all good. I forgot about that movie too, and then of course Lost Boys, and then this, and then he switched gears to do dramas. He did Sleepers. He did the Geronimo, an American Legend, which I think is brilliant, but no one remembers that movie. Nobody remembers that.
It's kind of like what happened with that Army Hammer guy. They were really trying to push that guy, and it kept not working. It's like no matter what they did, it's like
sometimes it doesn't work. Jason Patric didn't. I don't think. I think probably the biggest movie other than Lost Boys that people remember Jason Patric from is Speed 2. But of course, I love Rush. I think Rush is brilliant, but no one remembers Rush. Do you guys remember Rush?
I never saw it.
I remember the TV commercials for it.
That was the movie I was thinking about, though. It was like they were definitely trying to make him like an action star.
He was a good actor, but they couldn't sell him. And it's a shame.
And he has like a Hollywood pedigree. Most people don't. Well, if you're on Twitter any length of time, you did find this out. He is a Nepo baby. His dad is Jason Miller,
who Exorcist.
Yeah,
he was Father Karras in The Exorcist. Oh no, wait, no, Karras is the younger guy, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Aaron's the older guy, right? So yeah, he has a horror pedigree. His father was the priest in The Exorcist, so he could have leaned into that. Maybe he would have if this movie had been more successful.
I mean, he's still a good actor. I saw him.
He is.
There was but he never blew up like they wanted him to. He is he would be a good genre actor, like you're saying. But
he's a very dependable actor. Yeah. Let's put that there. He's very dependable. None of the movies that I've mentioned, he did a bad job in. He actually did a good job in all these movies. The films themselves were not worth the time people spent on them. Like Geronimo and American Legend, brilliant fucking movie. No one remembers it. Rush, brilliant movie. No one remembers it. Other than the sound.
Speed 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Speed 2, everyone remembers it, but for the wrong reasons. Sleepers, everyone thought Sleepers was going to be a huge hit. Sleepers did not do anything, and it had a huge pedigree of cast.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just happens sometimes.
Yeah, that's what like Robert De Niro and Kevin Bacon in it and stuff too. Yeah, like Kevin Bacon's it's abusing.
I like the movie because I love the director. I'm a Barry Levinson fan, so I'm old school.
Barry Levinson. So, what do we rate this movie, guys, and what object do we use to rate it with? I think there's a lot of things I could do. I mean, this is a Frankenstein movie, so we could use lightning bolts or
body parts.
What?
Disemboweled body parts.
Disemboweled hearts. Okay, Kevin picks disemboweled hearts. I think that's a good choice. I personally think the one thing that is the icon the one object that makes this movie for me, the one image that will never leave me, is what's on the poster. That eyeball of 3 different colors that's stitched together. So for me, this movie is 3 stitched together eyeballs out of 5.
All right, Dave.
Well, I'm just I think I mean I can't just say 3. I got to say 3.5. of them.
You can't. You sounded like you were going to say less than 3 there.
No, I'd say 3.5. I think it. I think it could have. Yeah, I mean, it could have been better. It was, but now that we talked about it more, I actually liked the movie more than I did after I finished it earlier. I was just a little frustrated with John Hurt's character in general. Now that we talk about it more, his actions make more sense. But I guess in my head, it's just that they're trying to make him like a hero when he's not really a hero. Which is funny if you think about him not being a hero and he's actually screwing stuff up, but he's perceived as a hero. I mean, he's presented as a hero, but his actions cause a lot of destruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know if the movie's intentionally that clever or not. But if you think about it on that level, you can justify what he does. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think they were trying to be that clever just by virtue of, look, let's remind ourselves who was one of the writers of this movie was Ed Niemeyer, the guy who wrote RoboCop. That movie with the biting social satire in it. Granted, a lot of that was, Paul Verhoeven framing it correctly. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe that was what they were going for on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to believe the guy who wrote RoboCop kind of was trying to do that on purpose. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, but it takes a genius like Paul Verhoeven to do it right.
Yeah, imagine if Paul Verhoeven had done this movie. Oh, man. It would have been a lot bloodier. It would have been a lot more boobs. And it probably would have been, I'm sorry, Roger, it probably would have been a little bit more interesting. But I'm sure Roger would have produced it because I know for a fact Roger is a big fan of Verhoeven's his Dutch movies. So, yeah. But yeah, so I only dock it a half a stitched together eyeball, just by virtue of, again, the consistent problems that the script has in the middle act. And now that you mention it, the miscasting of our lead,
John Hurt.
Yeah, it's.
I don't think he was ready for something like this. He was in his later years. He was like perfectly cast as the older guy in a lot of great movies. I think it's probably. I don't think he was ready.
Well, he did. I mean, he was great as the alien, and when he was younger, he did a lot of kind of character stuff that I've seen him act and stuff. But I think that him cast he's just presented as a heroic type of character, and he doesn't really come off that way. I mean, he's more character actory,
Yeah, I think he was probably more meant to be like a really awesome supporting character. There's like very few instances where he's really strong as the lead. The Elephant Man is one, but really the Elephant Man is really carried for huge chunks of it by Anthony Hopkins.
Right.
Who really deserved his own Oscar, because let's face it, as any good actor will tell you, you're only as good as your scene partner. Mm-hmm. And John Hurt couldn't have asked for a better scene partner in that movie than Anthony Hopkins. So the only other time I could think of where John Hurt was the lead in anything was I Just Had It, and now it's gone. My brain suddenly threw away. I don't know. Crap. But yeah, he's always popping up and making himself known as a great supporting character or the villain, or
and he's so terrific doing almost every other role I've seen him in. Not that he was bad here, I just think that it wasn't the right casting for that.
No, he was great in Spaceballs.
Oh yeah. But Raul Julia was terrific in this, and I think, but even if John Hurt played Frankenstein, he would have done a good job with it,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I prefer Raul Julia, obviously. But
have a choice. If you have a choice, go with Raul.
But like you're saying, with the accent, he's supposed to be American, and he has like a English accent, and then this. I didn't even think about that, but that makes it even worse.
Yeah, there's just some actors, I don't know what it is, they just can't. There's some British and Scottish. There's some British and Scottish actors that just cannot do an American accent.
Was he American? Was he American though? Because it started because he isn't he transported back from where I think he just says he's American to like so they don't ask him about his clothes so much. Because I'm not sure he was really well, because I think the time travel seems to work. Like he ends up in the same place that he's picked up, because like at the end when he comes back to he ends up in Frankenstein's demolished castle in the future scene.
If this movie were much smarter in the science aspect of it on purpose, I would say yes, Dave Watkins. But I think no, because I think earlier when they showed the time tornadoes and stuff, there's an indication that time and space that is now unbound. I think the computer car even says as much. So
you can anywhere, like when you get transported through that, you just go anywhere.
You go anywhere, anytime. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So yeah, I think he's supposed to be American. He's living in Los Angeles. Sorry, New Los Angeles, because pretty much this is another thing I forgot to mention we could talk about, was that not only back in the 80s and 90s, always when we envision the near future, always we envision two major things usually happening. Number one is the Amazon is gone. And number two is everyone always assumes that the big one has happened by 2050. You know, the earthquake that everybody in Los Angeles is waiting for, the big one where part of Los Angeles is going into the ocean, you know?
We got about 25 years. It's going to happen before that, I guess.
We'll just make it into prison islands, like Escape from LA.
Yeah. Escape from LA, or in Demolition Man, where they call it New San Angeles. Yeah. I mean, there's a million other movies to think of around that time period where, for whatever reason, they all thought that surely in the next 20 or 30 years, Los Angeles will be in the ocean because of the big one. The big one's going to happen. So, yeah, I guess that's
happened yet.
Haven't happened yet. I have
it's coming though. It's coming. You got 25 years.
All right, so let me tell everyone what I thought of the movie, and so I'm going to give it 3 body parts.
Three ripped out hearts.
You said ripped out hearts. I'm just going to say 3 random body parts, whether it's an arm, a leg, a heart, or whatever. To be honest with you, I'm more of a traditionalist when it comes to Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein. So the thing is, sometimes this time travel stuff doesn't work for me. Sometimes it does. It's an interesting concept. Corman actually took it to a different level when he added that in there, and no one else has bothered to do that. So it would be interesting to go back and read the book to see how close the book it is versus how much Roger Corman actually diverged from the actual book. But since I don't plan on reading the book anytime soon, I don't know. But that being said, this made for a very interesting conversation because of so many aspects of the film that are not typical of a Frankenstein story film. And the fact that we have mentioned that this is Roger Corman's final directorial film also makes it a very important film in his filmography. And it is one that we hope more people will see, because we all know, or at least the 3 of us here discussing the movie know, that it is not a fondly remembered film, and 2, a film that most audiences even bother to watch. So, you know, like I said, this podcast is designed to help people come to these films that we think that they have not seen, or if they have seen, we give them insight on seeing it in a different light. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining us for this conversation about Frankenstein Unbound, the final directorial film from Roger Corman. I hope that you out there who are listening will seek out some of the other episodes that we've done discussing Roger Corman's films that he directed and produced, because we've been going back and forth between both. And make sure to check out our subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff, the social media stuff. I'm almost forgetting about modern day technology because we've been doing this film. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us on Conversations in Horror today. And you all have a good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024, Broken House Pictures production.